Yeah, let's tear in.
Let's get it. Okay, so my first question is actually I want to start before we get into Square. I wanted to learn a little bit about Myra when you started that. What was at that time? I know you didn't have the innovation stack as like a formal idea, but I wanted to know like what about that company had a innovation stack, and then also looking back on that company, like what innovation stacks would you might have employed for it?
Well, Mira was the
Mira.
first company I really set up in, my God, that was 1989. So I had none of these concepts. I didn't know what I was doing. But what was interesting about Mira was that what the company did was invent a new type of product, which was basically taking trade literature and putting it on CD-ROM. Not terribly innovative, except if you thought about it, back in the day, people would go to trade shows and there was no internet, so there was no place to go for a central reference on industry's information. So like we would go to the National Electric Sign Association, NISA, and these were all, I remember how long ago it was because it was before they invented the blue LED.
Oh wow!
But like the signs were just like yellow and green, the red, yellow, and green. They could do red, yellow, and green, but they couldn't do blue yet. So you didn't have full color. But I still remember, there was rumors of a blue LED. That's how old this company was. But the thing that Mira was doing was building a small innovation stack in the world of publishing, and it was pre-internet, and it was very crazy because what I learned at Mira was basically how my stuff was different than other people's stuff. When I had a problem in my business and I would go to one of my friends for help, they would give me advice that worked in their business, and I'd bring it over and try to copy it in my business, and it wouldn't work. And I always thought it was me. I thought I was just a bad manager. And that may actually be true, but it's also true that the tools that apply to businesses that have sort of established business models are different than the tools that entrepreneurs use.
Very nice. That was very interesting. So my second question is, what's sparked the actual name of the innovation stack, and while you're doing your research, like what was this should be called this moment for you?
So what happened during the research, I was not looking at Square or any companies in the tech world because, well, first of all, I knew Square having lived through it, but the tech companies, I think, are all bad subjects to study because they have these tremendous network effects, these tremendous marketplace effects, and those effects can overwhelm everything else. In other words, you can be just a complete idiot running a company with network effect, and you will be successful. Like you could put, a small hamster at the helm of some of these companies, and they would still make money.
Goodness.
So I excluded tech from studies, and I just went back and looked at non-tech phenomenon, and I started to see this pattern, and all of a sudden, it started to clarify, and I was like, wait, all of these companies are doing the same thing that we just did here, which was invention on invention on invention on invention on invention. No single invention being that significant, but the collective was super powerful, and it was also unique. And I saw this, and in the book, there are, 4 examples that I cite in the book, but I found dozens of examples. And I was like, oh my God, this is a pattern. And of course, whenever I have an idea, I always assume that somebody else had it and earlier than I did. So I started looking through, the literature to see if anybody had talked about this, and I couldn't find anybody. Nobody had discussed it. And I was like, okay, I need to coin a phrase, call it an innovation, and then I needed to describe the phenomenon, which eventually became the book.
Yeah, exactly. And so, you kind of touched on it, but just for layman's terms, for people that are unfamiliar or are excited about reading the book, What is an innovation stack? And when starting a new entrepreneurial venture, how do you personally go about creating your innovation stack?
So an innovation stack is just a collection of reactions to a harsh environment. And when I say reactions, I mean innovation is usually the last resort, i.e. copy if you can, but be ready if you can't copy this a solution to invent a solution yourself. And also be ready for that thing that you invented to cause other problems that you will also need to find solutions for. And that is sort of the core dynamic of the innovation stack, which is like, oh, I got this little problem, I'm going to do this. Oh, I solved this problem, but now I've created these other two problems, so I'm going to do this and this. And that cycle, if carried to completion, will typically resolve in one of two ways. Either it'll overwhelm you. In other words, you'll have too many problems and you'll just die. Or you will find that you come up with this thing called an innovation stack, which is just a bunch of stuff that you do differently from everybody else that solve the initial problem that you set out to solve. And I think the most important thing for me, and actually from some other people who've read the book who themselves have been super successful, is to recognize that it feels different to do an innovative process than to do what is considered normal business. You know, in the normal course of business, you're going to be hiring experts, working with consultants, stealing talent from your competition who has certain skills. Like, you're going to be doing all this stuff that sort of presumes that in somebody's head is the solution to the problem you're facing. Innovators don't get to do that.
Exactly. And that's what actually was probably the most fascinating part of the book for me, was looking at that distinction that you created between entrepreneurs and business people. Because I think for so long we kind of are like, oh, we put everything into the, especially now, everyone's an entrepreneur. Anybody that has a business is an entrepreneur. So I think that distinction you created actually raises the progression of entrepreneurship, and to really be that person that creates something really revolutionary, something that's truly unique, and it's right outside the city wall that you're talking about.
Yeah, and I didn't create it. I researched it. I would credit Joseph Schumpeter, 150 years ago, for actually coining the term and popularizing it. But here's the thing: like, if we don't have a word for something, or if the word that we used to have has now gotten some different meaning, then the people with the secrets, because people have figured out what I figured out, over the last 100 years. So where is all their knowledge? Like, how did they share that knowledge? And the answer is, well, they couldn't.
Yeah.
Because they didn't have a word. And it's just funny, because I literally start the book with the definition of the word that I needed to write the book. And it was sort of shocking, because when I set out to write the book, I realized at that moment, it wasn't until that moment, I realized that, oh, wait a second, I can't do this in the English language. Like, the English language is deficient. Like, maybe if I was speaking Mandarin or Swahili or some other language that like had these concepts, but like English didn't have the concepts that I needed. And I was like, oh, well, that explains why I didn't find this discussed anywhere.
Yeah, that's true. So to go into that, I guess, who were some other entrepreneurs, just either maybe you said not as many in today's time, but just in general, that you that have employed the innovation stack that didn't make the book, but are still like worth going to study just for like continuing to understand this what you talked about in the book?
Well, Nikola Tesla, fantastic series of cascading innovations within the world of electricity. Fascinating. But again, the problem with using Tesla as an example is that these days, if you say Tesla, the scientist, everyone thinks, oh, Tesla, the car company. So it's just a horrible
Yeah,
term
exactly.
it just confuses everybody. So I kind of stick away from that, but fascinating reading. And of course, Tesla worked for Edison, who also had, gotten this concept pretty much down. And he actually had somewhat of an innovation factory in a lot of ways. He was fascinating to study. Henry Ford, great example. Bessemer, great example. But it's funny what you can do instead of listening to my examples. You go find your own.
Yeah.
And the formula for finding your own is find an industry, take an industry, pick, I don't care what it is, shoes, whatever. Let's take shoes. Okay. Now, shoes aren't much different from the way they were 20 years ago and 50 years ago. But like if you go back far enough in time, you'll find the beginning of the shoe business was probably super interesting. That's not what I've studied, so I can't, actually back into that.
Yeah,
but
exactly.
Like, you can literally pick any industry and trace it back in time. You'll find an innovation stack. So airplanes, okay, heavier than air powered flight. Planes are pretty much. I mean, look at the planes. Most airplanes look like they did in the 1970s.
Exactly.
Like if you go back to watch an old James Bond movie, everything looks out of date. Like the telephones, the dress, like everybody looks weird except the plane. They're like, oh, well, I flew in one of those last week.
Exactly.
So trace aviation back to its start, and boom, you hit the innovation stacks. And in this case, the Wright brothers would be a great example of an innovation stack. But you can literally discover your own just by tracing it back to the beginning of any industry.
Very nice. So also I want to talk a little about it. It seems that some of the best, the perfect problems to solve are discovered by frustration with old ways or methods of doing things. What are some problems still today that frustrate you as you're going through life? Like, what are things that still frustrate you?
Oh my God, I got dozens. The ones the one I'm sort of toying with right now is an inexpensive diaper. If you know anything about diapers in the United States, about a third of U.S. families struggle to pay for them. They're quite expensive, and it turns out they get more expensive if you're poor. Because if you're rich, you get them on, diaper service or Amazon, subscription, and they, pull up a semi to your front yard and unload diapers. Yeah. But if you're poor, you're buying diapers in small quantities from super expensive, dollar stores or local stores. It's a mess. And I thought, well, if we could take the average price of a diaper from 25 cents down to 5 cents, maybe we would stop the cycle of poverty that, I see around me. I literally spend a lot of time in neighborhoods where that makes a difference. And so I'm working on diapers. Now, do I know what the heck I'm doing? No. How am I doing it? It's just material research at this point. I'm just trying to figure out something that'll, not cause a bunch of landfill problems and is cheap and will absorb half a cup of pee. But diapers is a good example, and super low tech. It's one of those things that I believe would really help people if I'm successful. I'm sort of half-heartedly working on it. I'm not. That's not like I don't get up every morning and work on diapers yet. I haven't quite gotten obsessed with it yet. But that's an example of a problem.
Yeah, nowhere, and it kind of talks about how you kind of talk about it throughout the book is that being an entrepreneur is going into that field of even sometimes unknown, like where you've hit that information gap and you're going for that. So I think what you're talking about even with diapers and in that inexpensive range is going into that unknown and seeing where it leads you. So you talk a lot in length of the juxtaposition between copying and innovation. What strategies do you use as an entrepreneur to clear up your own thinking? I know you said you took a break when you took a break from business books and all types of books when you're writing this book, but what are other ways you do to clear up your thinking so you get to original thinking?
Well, so you got the first one, which is don't pollute yourself with other people's thoughts too much if you're trying to do original work. And what I try to do, if I know I have to do something and I want it to be sort of non-derivative, like writing, I just isolate myself. I don't consume stuff that might infect me with other people's thought patterns because I'm so, well, I think a lot of people are like this, but I'm heavily, heavily conditioned to copy my solutions from the world. Like that's 99.99% of the time. That's how I'm going to react to the world in all cases. So that isolation is super important. The second thing I find that's helpful for me is I do wildly different activities. So I'll go work in the glass studio, or I'll go work in the wood, or I'll go fly a plane, or I'll go sit at a daycare, or sometimes I go to a sheltered workshop. I don't know if you know what a sheltered workshop is,
yeah.
But here in Missouri we have these are basically homes for handicapped people and people with mental disabilities. And I'll just go work with them. You just spend a day in an unair-conditioned room sorting bolts with a guy next to me who, has really, really serious problems, but is happy. Like it's actually this wonderful experience. Before I could afford therapy, like that was my therapy. I would just, because anytime I thought I had a problem, I just go work with, people who have severe problems.
Yeah.
And I was like, oh, I got nothing to complain about. So like mind clearing stuff like that has been super helpful for me.
Very nice. So just like Netflix was able to fend off a giant company in Blockbuster, you all did the same at Square against Amazon. How were you able to keep yourself and your team focused, serving customers versus like focusing on the competition?
Well, so we took a good look at Amazon when they copied Square and looked at all the things that they were doing. And the things that they were doing fell into two categories. Either it was a direct copy of something that we were already doing. Okay, in other words, Amazon, copied our reader, copied our software, copied a bunch of the stuff we're doing. So they like, okay, well, we're already doing that, and we're probably doing it a little better than they will because we've been doing it longer. We've had some experience. The second thing, the second category was stuff that we either do or just seemed insane. So we couldn't, for instance, add the Amazon brand name. Like the Amazon name by itself legitimizes an offering. Well, Square was a little startup. People hadn't heard of us. Everybody had heard of Amazon. So by putting their brand on their product immediately had, in some ways, a higher stature than we did. But we couldn't copy that. I mean, it wasn't like, well, we'll just go get a brand like Amazon. No, you can't do that. You got to build it. So that's off the table. And then, the insane one was the price that they were charging was below our cost. And we were like, well, to copy that one would be insane. It just doesn't make any sense, the price that they were charging. And we thought, well, maybe Amazon's just way smarter than we are and has figured out to do stuff that we can't do. But it turns out that was not the case. It turns out they were just using their giant cash pile to subsidize a product and hoped to break into the market by essentially taking a loss. So we didn't copy that either. And so as far as keeping the team focused, that was not hard at all because, we were so busy. We were scrambling. We were doubling in size every 2 months. Now, I mean, that is an insane growth rate. And that growth rate had gone on it went on almost for 3 years.
Goodness.
I mean, you just wear out your adrenal gland. By the end of that, you're so used to this hyper growth that something shows up at the doorstep that's on fire. And you go, oh, well, let's put it over there with the other burning stuff. We'll get to it later.
Wow.
So I mean, Amazon was really stressful, but as far as a net increase in stress, it wasn't too bad.
Yeah, sounds good. So since the IPO and like becoming Square becoming a giant in the fintech industry, what innovation stacks like moving forward? I mean, since IPO, and what innovation stacks has Square created, and or what will they need to create in order to fend off new startups that you try to infringe? And now that you guys are kind of the big giants in that industry, how will you like continue to fend off new startups that come and try to infringe?
So one is to just understand the principles in the innovation stack, to know when it's appropriate to copy and know when you need to innovate. Like recognizing that line is a huge thing. But well, I'm super proud of Square for having come up with Cash App. Okay? So if you look at Cash App, I mean, that's a minor miracle because Cash App was started, actually right about the same time Amazon was attacking us, like 2014, 2015. There was no sort of viable person-to-person payment system out there. Venmo had this, sort of nascent product, but nobody knew what Venmo was doing. And Venmo failed twice and got sold twice. And it was failing a third time until Square's Cash App actually set an example of how person-to-person payments could be done. And since Cash App was released, Venmo has been copying everything that we do. I mean, just look at what PayPal does. Look at what Square does, and then watch PayPal do it 6 months later. Yeah. Joking at the board meeting the other day because we just bought Tidal, and I was like, now now PayPal has to buy Spotify, right? Because but look at what Cash App has done. There's a complete innovation stack there. There's so many things that we did for the first time ever. And it all fits together. It's a wonderful product. It's an awesome experience. And we keep growing it. Yeah. So I was super happy that Square, even after becoming a public company, could still, sort of do stuff like that. I'm kind of excited about Tidal, although I have to say I haven't got an idea yet of exactly what that's going to look like. But, Jesse, who's sort of running that division now, Jesse gets it. Now the question is, what are the problems in, the music industry, and, is Jesse's team able to put together something innovative there? It remains to be seen. Yeah. But the other thing is maybe Tidal just becomes a sort of a second runner to Spotify. I hope that's not what we do, but if they want to be Venmo to our Cash App, mm-hmm. Then Tidal will be the second thing. It's kind of there now, but I think it could be a lot more.
Yeah, and I do enjoy the collaboration right there, that because you see like the crossroads between being an independent artist and also Cash App being a place where you can get money for what you do. And a lot of the industry of music is having a lot of contract issues. So I think there is, being an independent artist, that connection, there's something there that'd be really cool.
It is. And, yeah. Oh, go ahead.
No, go ahead. I was finished right there.
I was going to say, I've published CDs for my friends, because my other company at Mira used to do music on the side. Yeah. Because the music business was so messed up that a lot of my friends who had bands used us to produce their work. And then actually one of my buddies actually built a recording studio that Nelly bought. So Nelly's first recording studio was built by my buddy, and I helped work on it. So it's like, that's how small the music community here is. And everybody knows somebody. As a matter of fact, I just got a call from somebody at Nelly's group who wants to do another project with us. So I like the idea of DNA in the small business space, and definitely artists fall into that category, and I'm real comfortable with them. So yeah, I think it's good. Yeah.
Exactly. And while we were talking, I love Cash App. Like, I've always been using it since I was in college, and especially going especially having this small business too, like going against like PayPal and how it kind of holds your money for like 4 or 5 days. It was always miserable. Like I thought that was a waste of time that I could have had my money to use for other things. So I've always been a big fan of
Oh
Cash
yeah.
App. Which goes into actually what I was gonna say recently with Robinhood, what we found. I mean, recently Robinhood found themselves on the bad side of a public eye with their handling of GameStop, AMC, Nokia, and a few of those meme stocks. Knowing that Cash App also is a platform that's helping democratize investing, what did you personally learn from that whole experience?
So, we sort of missed that whole experience because Cash App does not allow you to trade some of those stocks.
Yeah.
Like we have a curated subset of stocks that we allow you to trade because, well, I won't explain the mechanics of it because it put your readers to sleep. But I mean, the bottom line is we didn't have a comprehensive offering, and they did, and they got into trouble. Look, I've got a bunch of problems with Robinhood and some of the things that they've done and some of the ways they treat their users, which I'm happy that we don't do at Square. But I have to say that in this case, I don't fault them for, getting upside down on this one. Okay. Because I think they were taken by surprise. Their system was overwhelmed. It broke. And they did what they could to patch it together. And a lot of people, were upset. But that's the nature of something that is, sort of new and innovative. Test it out. It might break. But I love the fact that they, were taking more risk. And so I think the lesson for Square and us is like, we should have another. We should have been there with them. Like we should have also been a company that buckled under the weight. Like I'm bummed that we didn't also get in a little bit of trouble there.
Yeah.
I mean, yeah, I think we need to take a little more risk back.
That's true. So Square contributes to the e-commerce in a huge way. Do you think blockchain technology can have an equal impact on future payment processes?
Oh, absolutely. I think blockchain is probably the most significant financial innovation in the last decade. It's huge. It has a bunch of problems. It has a bunch of, just to talk, I would take hours. I'm not this super fan of anonymous payment. I think anonymous payment is good up to a point, but then you better get legit. Otherwise, we're going to have massive crime.
Yeah.
And so I'm cautious, and I believe governments are going to be pretty draconian in the way they start regulating crypto, because governments are going to start losing control of their tax bases and their economies. And I think that's going to be an area of sort of chaos. That said, I like chaotic environments. Like I think they're bad for they're bad for most of the world, but if you're actually in the business of sort of innovation, chaos is your friend. Like anytime the world is disrupted, the innovators move ahead relative to everybody else.
Yeah.
So, and I'm not saying I want the world to be,
in a constant
in anarchy.
Yeah.
But I'm saying that, I'm saying that I think at least as far as blockchain, that's going to start coming, and when it does, we'll be in for some interesting times.
Yeah, I agree. So also a lot of our readers are writers too. So I also want to ask a couple questions just about your writing style and all that. So your writing style is full of humor and wit, and I was just wondering, has your humor always been something that's helped you in business? Like, has it always been an advantage to you in business? And do you think humor goes a long way for people that are entrepreneurs venturing out of the city walls that you talk about?
Yeah, it's definitely a protector against the absurd. So if you can laugh at stuff, you'll be better off mentally than if you cry about stuff.
Yeah.
So I'm doing some work in a part of St. Louis that's kind of rough. and I'm fixing up some old houses, and we got cross with this one guy who burned our houses down. Like, that's what he did. You know, like arson. He torched 3 houses and almost killed somebody. I mean, it was terrible. And I was really upset about that. And like, now I can kind of laugh about it because nobody got hurt. It was just a bunch of old buildings that got torched. But it's having the ability to have, even if it's gallows humor, even if it's like dark humor, which, you know, the case of arson it is, just the ability to laugh at yourself and the mistakes you make, because the process of innovation is riddled with mistakes.
Yeah.
Any new discovery is going to be this rocky road. And if you can laugh at it, you know, one of my buddy who built Nelly's studio, like, he and I became friends because every time I had a problem, he had a bigger problem.
Goodness.
You know, like I would call him up and I'm like, you never believe what happened. He's like, oh, I just did this. I was like, oh my God, you know, and we would laugh about it. So that's important. And then by writing, the reason there's so much humor in my book and, you know, in basically my life, hopefully, is because, man, that's the joy. Like, let's have some fun with this. Like, you can learn a lesson and still be laughing at the same time. As a matter of fact, if you're laughing, you'll probably remember that lesson better.
Oh, yeah.
So, you know, I'm lucky. I hang out with people who, I told the story of Bob, okay? So, you know, Bob, the guy with the car
in
the book.
Yeah.
So I got a call from him like 2 weeks ago. Calls me up. He's like, Jim, I'm in jail. He's like, it was fault. I got into a fight with the cops. I wrestled the gun away from the cop, and the gun went off, and bond is $1 million.
Goodness.
And you got to come get me out. And my literal first thought was, again? Like, seriously? Second time with the cops? Like, second time with the gun? Like, this really?
Goodness.
And Bob, this is 7:30 in the morning 2 weeks ago. I was like, hey, Jim, April Fool. He totally nailed me. He totally got me. Now, here's the messed up thing about this. When my friend Bob calls and says he's been arrested and shot a cop, you have to take him seriously.
Yeah, see?
Like, that stuff happens. Why? Like, the last time it happened, the cop shot him. But, like I got to take that one seriously. Yeah. And he got me. He had me. I was laughing my head off. So, you know, hang out with people who are like that, and just makes your life better. And if you can't hang out with people like that, at least, you know, listen to other people tell their stories, because it's good times.
Yeah, that's true. And I went to school out in Atlanta, so I definitely have heard about what you're talking about, the arson and all that. Like, I've seen some crazy stuff. Yeah.
Oh, my God. It's, you know, I mean, gotta have a sense of humor.
You have to. So also, I know you were at one point, I might be mistaken, but at one point this was gonna be more of a graphic novel. But what was your overall writing process like for this book?
So it started in Herb Kelleher's office.
Okay.
You know, I was down with Herb, basically vetting my research with somebody who was still alive, because all the people that I had studied had, you know, died years ago. And Herb got really excited. And this guy's a legend. Like, Herb Kelleher was one of the men that I idolized. Just, I couldn't believe I could, you know, talk to him, let alone have a conversation with him, let alone, you know, go out to lunch with him. And, like, he was so cool. And Herb asked me how I was going to share my work with the world. And, you know, this is like getting a homework assignment from God. Oh, wow. Like, because Herb, you know, he's got this deity effect, because he smokes so much that his voice comes out of a cloud. Goodness. You know, it's just great guy. So Herb sort of got me thinking, oh God, I gotta pump this. And then I thought about the format, and then the stories were so good. They were so exciting that I thought, well, I don't have to do a boring business book. I can do a graphic novel because there are, explosions and cities burning and Nazis and subterfuge, and there's, people. I mean, there's all sorts of crazy stuff happening in these innovative companies. And I thought, wow, this is perfect for a graphic novel. So that's what I did. That was the book. Took about a year to put it together. I then was so excited to tell Herb, sort of like, surprise, look what I did, And Herb hated it. I mean, he was, I think I might have upset. I think he was actually angry. And I was really, really upset because I was so expecting the opposite response, because he's got a great sense of humor, and I thought, well, this will be fantastic. And he wanted nothing to do with it. He said, look, Jim, I can't stop you from doing this, but if you're going to do it this way, leave me out. Just out of respect for me, just leave me out. And I was like, I'm not leaving her, tell her out of my work. So I scrapped the graphic novel, and I rewrote the whole thing as the book that you now see. But I have to give credit to him, because he perceived something that I didn't realize, which is that the graphic novel is the proper vehicle for a hero story. Okay? Who are the protagonists in graphic novels? They're people with superpowers. They can see through walls, and they can bend steel, or bullets bounce off them, or, at the very least, they've got, they've got something that you don't have. Right? Yeah. Like, that's the difference between the superhero and the rest of us, and even Batman, Batman's just like a rich guy, but he's a really rich guy, and he's got all these weapons, cool Batmobiles and Batcopters and Bat whatever, so, like, there's no connection to the superhero. I don't look at Superman and go, oh yeah, just like my last Tuesday, what I was doing by writing my book as a graphic novel was creating this barrier between my readers and their potential as entrepreneurs. And the message of my book is like, look, the people who succeed here, they are not experts. They are not even all that special. They're just people who happen to be in these weird circumstances, and then they build these innovation stacks, and then boom, they take over, their industry. But it's not Kelleher or Jack Dorsey or, Ingvar Kamprad had superpowers. These were just people who refused to quit. In a certain set of circumstances, they become super powerful. But if I'd written this as a graphic novel, it would have alienated the people that I want to reach. And instead, by putting it out as a book, it's not quite as entertaining, but it's also way more approachable, because I want you at the end of the book to sit there and go, hey, wait a second. All these super important, super powerful, super wealthy folks are just like me. Yeah. They're just, oh my God. I want you to see yourself in APG&E. I want to see yourself in the stories that I tell, because, hey, that's who does this stuff. These are not superheroes.
Yeah. And that's why I think books have to go through that refining period over and over again until you get something really clean. Like, if you don't have editors and publicists and all these people that are looking and catching mistakes, you can end up with a book that may miss the ultimate point of where you want to go in the first place.
Yeah. I mean, the book you read, I've rewritten 8 times. Yeah. Like, the first published version of my book is a complete revision. It took me 3 years. I mean, that was not an easy task.
Yeah, it always is a challenge. So I've just like 2 or 3 more questions, but I'm gonna lump one in with one another. So what were some books that you read earlier on in your entrepreneur endeavor that really helped shape your understanding of like entrepreneurship and business? And then What's the best book you've read so far this year?
Wow. So I am. I'll take the last question first because it's one I'm reading. I'm currently reading Churchill's autobiography on World War II.
Okay.
And it's The Gathering Storm. I'm still at the beginning. But reading his writing, first of all, he's a brilliant writer. Secondly, it turns out that the nuances of the path up to World War II are fascinating.
Really? Oh, I gotta check this out.
Oh my God. Yeah. I mean, like World War II could have been stopped a dozen different ways. Like, and it was this, conglomeration of events that ultimately, killed millions of people.
Yeah.
And literally changed the world. And I think Churchill, to a large extent, was as close to we've ever had as a superhero as far as, politician goes. But that's what I'm reading right now. As far as, sort of books over time, a book called The E-Myth by, I think the author was Gerber. I read that in 1986. And I was too poor to actually buy the book, so I would go stand in the bookstore to read it. I was living as a student. I didn't have any money.
Yeah.
I was in London, and I read the thing literally standing in the stacks. I'd, come and read a couple pages every day. It was really kind of weird. But
I've done it before.
That book had a lot of impact on me because its main message was, if you're great at something and you start a company to do that thing that you're great at, you will almost likely not do that thing. So you're a great plumber, and you open a plumbing company, you'll find that opening a plumbing company means, managing a fleet of trucks and ordering, supplies and, scheduling appointments and handling payroll. And you end up doing all this other stuff that's not plumbing. You're a great plumber, but you're not doing plumbing anymore. You're not being a great plumber. You're being this sort of weird, administrator. And he talks about this, and I thought that was a very insightful thing. Another book that I'm sitting here looking at on my bookshelf is the pre-publication draft of The Great. So Jim Collins and I were speaking at a conference, and we struck up a conversation, and he sent me a draft of Good to Great. I never read the final version of Good to Great, but his draft was really cool. And the central idea in there's actually sort of two mega ideas in Good to Great. The most important, I think, is the good is the enemy of great. And that's always stuck with me, which is that because we have good, we tend to not have great. You have a, car that's good enough, so you don't go looking for a great car. Like, you have clothes that are good enough, so you don't try to find stuff that you thought was great. Like, you have good friends. Your friends are okay, and they're your friends, so you kind of deal with it. But they fill the void, and therefore you don't go out and find great friends. Like, it's this thing that good occupies the space, and then once the space is occupied, we don't keep looking. And that was a very interesting concept, especially in the idea of business. Like, we don't have great because we have good. Second idea from the Good to Great that's always stuck with me is that, again, much like I sort of say in the innovation stack, is that the people in the companies that Collins studied, these were not superheroes either. These were pretty normal folks who had a certain skill, but they were not sort of unbelievably talented superhero people. And I thought that was very empowering. Those are a couple.
Okay. Yeah,
I can talk about books forever.
Yeah.
I can just talk books, but.
Of course. A lot of our audience loves books, so we always leave. We have a couple standard questions we always have, so they can always find new references. So the other question is, do you plan on writing more books in the future?
I don't plan on it, but I didn't plan on writing any of the 4 books that I've written to date.
Okay.
I've got 2 computer science books, 1 glass-blowing textbook, and now Innovation Stack.
Yeah.
I am not planning to write another book. At some point, if I have an idea that needs to be expressed that way, I'll probably knuckle down and do it again. But no plans right now.
Yeah, I forgot about that. That was one of the craziest parts in the book too, is that you just wrote like a whole textbook in college as a freshman. I thought that was impressive.
Again, it was one of those things. I was just pissed off. Like, I was just really upset that the textbook that we were given was bad, and so upset that I thought I could write a better one. Mm-hmm. And look, if you're given a low standard, which the textbook that we had in my programming class in college was terrible. It would not have been hard to better that, and so that was my aspiration. And it turns out that it got published, and then they wanted another book, so I got a little start that way as an author. But what that really did, the interesting thing about that process was not the books; it was the reputation that I got as somebody who really knew computers, which was undeserved. Like, I'm not a great programmer, but I was invited to play with the great programmers because I was published. Oh. And so I got invited to the parties that, the super smart programmers were going to, and it's a different sort of world. And I would not have gotten in that world on talent, but I could write my way in, which was sort of interesting.
Yeah, that's very nice. Yeah, and then I guess my last question is, where can I buy like one of your like double twist glass spouts? Is there a website we can go to for the?
So glassfaucet.com is if you wanted to buy a double twist glass bathroom faucet, we're still selling them. I don't make them that much anymore. I'm not really super interested in making those things, although I have a room full of them. At the studio, I still ship them out. What I'm making today, literally making today, is I'm making whiskey glasses that are hard to drink from.
Wow.
I don't have any photos of them online or anything, but these are glasses, and they've got wavy edges, so you can't just drink from the thing absentmindedly. Like, it takes your attention back to the thing you're drinking. And I don't know if they'll sell or anything, but I'm fascinated with this idea of something you can't ignore because it doesn't quite do the job that well. Like these days when I get in my car, I don't pay attention to my car. Like, my car is so functional now that, it starts, it runs, it doesn't vibrate. It does, like, I don't pay attention to my car. My old car, like, that I had to park it on a hill and pop start it because the starter was crap. And, one of the tires was kind of loose, so I couldn't drive over 60 miles an hour. Or if I drove over 60, it had to be like an even multiple of 10 because, like, it got these resonant frequencies at like 65. The front end would come off, so I'd have to drive for 60 or 70, but like never 65. Like I had to pay attention to that car.
Yeah.
Like, I couldn't talk to you and drive at the same time because it was like the car was consuming all of my bandwidth. Now I'm actually in the studio this week and for the next month making glasses that are purposely difficult to drink from. So there you go.
That's interesting. I'm ready for it.
Some of my glass.
Yeah.
I'll send you a whiskey glass, and you can see if it dribbles down your shirt.
I'm excited now. This is awesome.
And these are prototypes, so they're not quite right yet. So no promises, but there you go, man.
No worries. Yeah, and that car sounds like my college car, so I know exactly how that goes.
Oh, yeah.
Yep, got to be careful with them. Well, I just want to say thank you so much again for taking the time out of your day. Jim, I really do appreciate you.
Yeah, well, Kyle, I tremendous respect, so thank you.
Yep, thank you. Have a great rest of your day.